Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, September 12th, 2021. We hope you're having a great weekend. We've got members of the media, academia, and financial services standing by as we analyze all the news this week in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. Let's kick off the show with a look at regulation, litigation, and what's going on Capitol Hill. And joining us, of course, are the legal eagles, David Levine, Kevin Walsh. Both are principals with Groom Law Group, an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, great to talk to you as always this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Jeff, it is always good being on the show. And, I as we get into the fall, legislation is heating up. And in particular, there's another nation, and it's reconciliation. So I think this week we're going to talk about some of the retirement legislation that could be part of budget reconciliation.
All right, David, lay it on us.
Sure. Coming back from the vacation that many of us have been on, or staycation as the case may be.
Which one, David?
I would call it one in both because I respect everybody who does whatever they want, Kevin. I'm not getting into that political discussion.
No.
But getting into politics today, as Kevin well put, it's time for reconciliation. Let's get ready to rumble. So what does it mean? Well, there's a lot out there at this point in reconciliation. Benefits is just part of it. But ironically, retirement is front and center. If you look at all the publications, one of the first things to move forward are the retirement elements. There's a lot in there, but let's talk about the core thing. Universal 401k, pushing people to have coverage in 401k or similar type of benefit plans across the United States. I'm not going to use the M word, the mandate from the Affordable Care Act. But that's basically what this is. Instead, what's going on is there's been the movement, just to set the backstory, in the past many years, where a number of states have been out there, Illinois, California, others, saying if you're an employer and you don't offer a 401k plan, you have to offer an IRA vehicle through the state where you put away money for your employees. There's been litigation back and forth, but at this moment, those programs are in place and they've won in court, for instance, in California at this moment. And now the federal government is jumping in through Congress where they're basically saying, look, as an employer, you've got to have a 401k or else there's tax penalty consequences. You've got to have a 401k for your employees. Now, the devil's in the details about are there certain employers that are carved out, like certain governmental entities, things like that? Yes. We could spend a whole nother show on that if and when this moves forward in greater detail. But the key is you need to put people into plans. You need to enroll them. There's provisions about increasing, and it would still allow the pre-existing state programs to sort of have a grandfather. Importantly, for those of you who are already in 401ks, you get a pass as well. So to the extent that employers already have 401ks, there's a pretty decent pass in there, although there's nuances and details that I know we're already getting questions from clients on as to how far it goes. Just like the questions we're getting on the different state programs about what's required, what's not. But aside from the auto-enroll, increase, required percentages, what people have to put in, not about match here, there is one other element that I think is really key. And Kevin, you want to talk about that other element that's really going to get some attention?
Yeah, sure, David. And it seemed like a pretty political decision on your part to steer clear of the word mandate this week. But
I am mandating you talk about this special topic, Kevin.
Oh, my Lord.
But the other key thing that's getting a lot of attention in this universal coverage provision is that it would require these plans to offer, an in-plan annuity option for participants who have a balance above, and I believe the threshold in the draft legislation right now is $200,000. And this is kind of significant because one of the frustrations of the retirement space has been kind of the decline of defined benefit plans where people are insured a specified amount per year in retirement, so they can live not just to retirement, but they have a dignity through retirement because they're not taking the risk that they run out of money. In terms of offering annuities in plan, in the Secure Act a few years ago, there was legislation that made it easier to offer annuities in plan, and we're beginning to see some uptick there. But this bill really goes a step further, and it actually would require employers to offer an in-plan annuity feature. And the idea of an in-plan annuity feature is it would allow folks who have, an amount of money in their retirement plan that they're concerned about their ability to manage it. They don't know how long they're going to live. They also may not know or may not be comfortable picking what amount they feel like they can spend each year. It would allow those folks to offload their risk of running out of money and place it on an annuity company, and in a way convert their defined contribution plan to a defined benefit plan. So, when we look at this reconciliation bill, this universal 401k, this universal coverage provision is getting a lot of attention. It's getting a lot of attention for a couple reasons. One is, that I'm struggling to use a different word, David, but it in some ways requires employers to offer 401ks.
Oh, it's a mandate.
It is a mandate, and it also, provides this annuity feature that participants have seemingly been looking for a while, but that for various reasons have been tougher to offer in plan.
And Kevin, one item I'll add on that is, we're making comments about mandates. The world has changed a lot since 2009. You're not seeing politically the same pushback on this requirement mandate. So what we've seen in the past. So sort of in summation, there seems to be more support than there was, for instance, for this type of activity than the Affordable Care Act. The devil's in the details. But Kevin, tell me if you disagree. But I think we've got a little bit of a road to hoe before we get there, because as we all know, reconciliation is a messy, potentially long process given all the politics that are going on.
Yeah, David, I agree with you. I mean, you say, this provision might be less controversial than it was 9 years ago, but and it's that, if we zoom out a little bit, this provision might not be quite as controversial, but it's part of that big reconciliation package that's rumbling through Congress. And in order for it to get through, it looks like you need all 50 Democratic senators to all agree. You can only lose, I believe it's up to 3 votes in the House. It reminds me in some ways of the Republicans' efforts with healthcare reform in 2016, 2017, where, if the Democrats want to get this across the finish line, like the Republicans were trying to get that across the finish line, they're going to need to really build consensus. And where you need consensus, things can change up until the last minute.
Yeah. Can I just ask one quick question?
Sure, Jeff.
I know we've got about a minute left. I want to be sensitive to both of your times. Timing around reconciliation. You're mentioning this reconciliation. How long does it take? When does it start? Is it happening now? Can you give us an idea of that? What that looks like?
Sure.
I mean, I can give you so I worked on the Hill for a bit. My wife worked on the Hill for a bit, and the saying was, if you have the votes, you go to the floor. So, we're not going to see the bill clear the finish line in September, because they're still working on putting legislative text together. But realistically, this will move as soon as Joe Manchin and Bernie Sanders agree.
But Kevin, what about state and local tax deductibility? That's a whole other discussion.
Oh, my Lord. Yeah, we don't have enough time. Gentlemen, I want to be sensitive to your time. Thank you so much for stopping by the program. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. It's always good being on the show.
Bye, guys. Welcome back, and we're going to shift gears, talk a little bit, I should say, about technology and consumer products. And joining us on the line, he is lead advisor, executive producer for 7 Investing. We're talking about Daniel Klein. Dan, thanks so much for joining us again this morning.
Thanks, Jeff, but we're not breaking down the NFL season. I thought this was when we made our picks.
Well, I think I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan, and they've had a huge rash of injuries. I think they've had the most ACL tears in league history. So I'm not sure I want to make any picks.
If you have 5 ACL tears, the 6th one is free. So
well,
so they're working for that team discount.
It's free. Yeah, I mean, good luck with that health insurance. I'm pretty sure they're self-insured. All right, Dan, let's talk about, I think, a really interesting topic. We've got a lot to talk about. We want to talk about streaming prices. We want to talk about confirming the rumor with Amazon and TVs. But let's talk about automation, because automation has boomed during and after COVID.
Yeah, so we're seeing a labor shortage. It is very difficult right now for fast food places, even your Targets and your Walmarts and your Amazons, which have, I'm sure you saw this week that Amazon is now offering free college tuition, including paying for books and other study materials. There is a war over workers, and that's partially because as a country we have more job openings than we have people looking for jobs. Now,
Mhm.
are there some COVID related reasons for that? Yes, there are some people that have health considerations where they can't work. There are some people that don't have childcare. Up until very recently, there were some people that didn't have kids in school, so they weren't available.
Mhm.
But companies are looking at solving this in automated ways, but it's not the way you think about it. I think we think automated. We think that episode of The Simpsons where robots take over the nuclear power plant and it goes terribly badly because, of course, Homer Simpson was in charge of them. It's not like that. It's much more automation in the way you order from Starbucks, where, I can't remember the last time. Well, I can because Vegas didn't have automatic ordering. But in general, when I go to Starbucks, I hit a parking space and I put in a mobile order and pay. And depending on the line in the drive-through, I either go through the drive-through or walk in and pick it up at the counter, assuming I'm going to not eat it at the store or drink it at the store. That's the type of automation you're going to see, where things that can be made easier by technology get made easier. And I think there's another very low-hanging fruit that you're starting to see. We're seeing like FedEx bringing in robot arms to process packages. We know that Amazon is light years ahead with that because of their purchase of Kiva. So they have robots working alongside people at all their factories. I think the next one you're going to see is Walmart and Instacart, because there is no reason to have between those two companies roughly 300,000 people picking grocery orders. Now, do you need some human quality control? Probably. But you could probably get by with 5% of that and automating the rest of it. And the reality is, Walmart could probably, for at least the holiday season, shift that labor into other areas, where it's going to need help. And you're already seeing it. Look, I've talked about this before. Target's doing it badly. I think, Target has moved to a lot of self-checkout. And the self-checkout, well, if you're buying wine, someone has to check it. If you put something in wrong, they have to check. It's not great, but I think it's a bit of a growing pain, and it's going to get there. We aren't going to have fully automatic, McDonald's where like a robot is making your Big Mac because it's just so expensive. But we are going to see inventory and ordering and more things get automated.
And Dan, obviously, there's a lot of things that were accelerated from the pandemic: work from home, telecommuting, cyber breaches. I mean, as a result of some of the, in all seriousness, I mean, people using non-company sanctioned laptops and devices, and I think that opens some doors to some hackers. But you mentioned kind of repurposing people. I don't know. That sounds kind of like, I don't know, non-human, but like, people will have the opportunity to do things like logistics, customer service. I don't think customer service goes away. I think it's just different, right? I mean, in trying to park people into different roles that maybe that manufacturing job or that, as you said, that Big Mac delivery job inside the restaurant maybe goes away and gets automated.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think we overvalue the work from home shift because most people do jobs that can't work from home. Like, I don't know if you have a favorite bar, but I have a favorite bar restaurant here in West Palm Beach. And I know that the bartender there cannot email me and say, hey, what's your order for the next time you come in? I'll make it at home and someone will hand it to you. That's not how it works. A factory worker can't be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take my part of making a Tesla home. So I do think while that has been a white collar trend, maybe even a customer service trend, it's still not a vast majority of Americans. But you are going to see changes in what workers do. And yeah, if you're a Walmart, you have to think of it in very non-human terms. And if you're a person that can't deal with people, this is probably going to be bad for you. A lot of jobs that are going to be done by people are going to be interfacing with people. And look, AI will play a role in customer service, but we found that when you turn over customer service to AI, it generally involves you endlessly screaming or typing person until eventually you can get a human being. But could AI do a better job of making sure you get to the right person faster? That's possible. So I think we're going to see it's a lot around the edges where just things that like are semi-automated as it is. Look, you ordering at McDonald's on a kiosk is not a different process than the person at the register placing your order. It's roughly the same technology. You're going to see more things like drones taking inventory in warehouses, especially as RFID gets cheaper and easier to use. You're going to see just human labor shift to different roles. And obviously, you will see some extremes. We've talked about the Amazon Go stores, where it's basically you don't need any people. It's all you open the app, you don't go to a checkout, you walk. I saw one in an airport that was one direction. You walk through, you pick up your stuff, and when you walk out, it checks you out and you go. And it just seems like magic. We're going to see more of that. There's going to be less demand for human workers, but there are also less human workers. We're at an age where a lot of the baby boomers are nearing retirement, and we don't have as many people coming in to replace them. So look, we're seeing restaurants that are already having to close, a couple of days a week or not have the same hours. Some of this is short term, but a lot of it is just a reality of the current workforce. So these changes are coming.
Dan, let's talk about streaming because very popular. There's a lot of different streaming services, YouTube TV, Sling, and we have talked about them over the course of several years. Hulu, because of the popularity, they are actually, I think they're having some price raises in counterpart with Disney.
Yeah, so look, they're just inching their prices up. It's basically $1, depending which service you have. And I wanted to bring this up only because you're going to see this across the board. Because here's the reality. So I don't know what you pay for Netflix. I want to say it's like $14.99.
It comes with my T-Mobile, Dan.
But T-Mobile actually doesn't pay for all of it anymore. Since it went up, you actually pay like $1 or $2.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's on my bill.
It comes with my T-Mobile as well. But are you dropping Netflix if someone in your house watches it? Because Netflix goes from $14.99 to $16.99. And then 2 years later, if they go to $17.99, the reality is we're going to see the same price creep we've seen in other areas. Now, might there be marginal services that lose some people? Sure. If you paid for HBO Max and all you watch on it is, one show that's on, for 10 weeks a year, well, you might at some point go, you know what, I'm getting rid of HBO Max. But I think the reality is most of these services are pretty embedded in people's lives, and they're simply not going to get rid of them. And as long as these companies manage price increases, that if you have 5 services, and I think I have more than that, but if you have 5 services, I think you're going to find that like every couple of years your bill goes up, $5 to $10, but it doesn't feel the same as when like your cable company raised your bill by $6 or $7 because it's split across all of this. So look, I'm a big fan of streaming, but I do think people have to realize you get what you pay for. And we're actually all going to end up spending maybe less than we spent for cable, but we're going to get a lot less. And you could argue that what we're getting is better. Like Disney Plus is probably a much better hits per Dan ratio than the average channel on cable, and I mean hits that I'm going to be interested in for what I'm paying. But we're not going to have the 200 channel universe, and a lot of channels as cable shrinks are just going to go away because look, do we need MTV3 in a world where no one's paying their 2 cents to supplement that? And that sounds silly. It's like, who watches MTV3? And then you realize wait, last night I was flipping around and I don't know, they were showing an old concert of something I wanted to watch. So we are going to see a smaller universe, and I don't think we're going to see this massive savings that everyone thinks we're getting from cord cutting, especially those of us that are into sports and want some sort of live TV streaming service.
Yeah, it almost feels like we're embarking back to the a la carte cable model, which is kind of where this all kind of grew out of.
Yeah, and a la carte cable, which is something everyone said they wanted, you don't actually want. Why do I say that? Let's pretend you love the tennis network and I love the cooking channel. Well, if we both have no choice, we're getting a package that have both of those, and we're each paying a nickel or a quarter or whatever it is for those stations. And my quarter supports your channel, and your quarter supports my channel. If that system goes away, and it is dying, cable's losing millions of customers every year. It's not as quick as people would say, but it is still dying. At some point, that channel doesn't have the viewers, so its ad revenue goes down, and it's not getting that nickel or dime per viewer at the same amount. And at some point, the tennis channel goes, well, we can't afford to license these tournaments. We can't afford to do this original programming. And all of a sudden, it's either gutted or it doesn't exist anymore. So I do think we're going to see a smaller universe of content, albeit in a world where content has grown in 1,000 other ways. So you're going to lose things you like. And I think that is something, an unintended consequence that people are not considering. And I think the reality is, if you could say, hey, all the things I want would still be here, I actually think a lot of people would opt to pay a little bit more, but they don't really view it that way.
Dan, let's confirm something we talked about last week. And Amazon, I think, officially announced, it was rumored when we talked about it, but they announced that they are going to be building their own televisions, and this couldn't come at a more timely time, or at a better time, I guess is the right wording, with lower prices. Semiconductors, chips, hard to get. Those TV prices are only going to go up.
Yeah, there's two versions of the Amazon TV. One has like a sort of fancier version of the smart system whose name I won't say because it'll set off everybody's devices. And that one has it where you can just speak to your TV. You could say, hey, I want to watch Law & Order, and it will tell you the 19 stations that are airing some version of Law & Order at that time. The lesser version of it, which seems pretty good to me, still has Amazon Fire TV embedded. You just have to use the remote. I think you can still talk to it. You just have to push a button on the remote. And that model starts at about $350 for a, I want to say 45-inch television. I might be gay. It might be a 42. And even a 65-inch television is only about $550. That sounds a tad high given what we paid last Christmas season, but for an Amazon-built TV with its very excellent Fire platform built in, where prices are going to be this year, that's a very good value, and that is going to make the Samsungs of the world, which there are Samsungs with Samsung's Android-based platform, and there's also ones with Roku-based platforms. Those are going to look like less of a good deal. You might still buy the Roku one because it's hard to argue between Roku and Amazon Fire, but I don't see a lot of people buying the $400, or maybe it'll cost $450 this holiday season, 65-inch television, where they could spend a little more and get a significantly better product. So I actually think this is maybe not quite the same as the Amazon Kindle Fire tablets, which, you go, wait, I can get a Kindle Fire for $80 or an iPad for $600. Like, I'm going to get a Kindle Fire. It's not quite that price differential, but it is a good enough price that they're going to take market share, probably not from the Rokus of the world, but absolutely from the low budget TVs with, oddball Android operating systems.
Dan, what's the, while we're chatting, and I'm not ignoring you, I'm trying to do both two things at once.
I've done it too. We both host things.
Well, I'm on Amazon right now, and I'm looking at this, TVs, and they're so inexpensive for what you get. And I'm wondering, what's the quality? I haven't bought a TV in a long time, but many people out there might be thinking about it. What is it? What's the quality like on some of these lower cost models? I'm looking at one that's 55 inches. All new Insignia 55-inch. It's an LED 4K, released 2021, and it's a Smart Fire TV. It's for $379.99, Dan. That is not a lot of money.
No, and so here's the problem. When those TVs sell out, you're going to see prices increase because of the chip shortage. That being said, it depends what your goal is. So I don't care that much about picture quality or frame refresh speed. So for me, the risk on those cheap TVs is audio quality. And I don't mean I need cinematic audio quality. I mean, sometimes the lowest volume is too loud or the highest volume is too soft. When you get those cheap speakers, the lower priced TVs aren't going to be as pretty. The bezel, which is the edge around it, isn't going to be that disappearing infinity edge. Those are things that I largely don't care about. So our main TV in our regular house is sort of maybe a $500 65-inch TV. Whereas at our other house, where we're not watching a ton of television, because when we're there, we're doing stuff, and I would assume that's true of our guests as well. I have a 65-inch television, but it's not as pretty The sound isn't as good. Some of the features aren't as good. If you're watching a football game, it's sometimes noticeable depending what angle you're at. So it's one of those things where you have to think about what you like. If you're not a picture snob, if you're not an audio snob, it probably doesn't matter. If you're watching a ton of live sports that are fast moving at home, you probably want to spend a little bit more money and do a little bit of homework on things like how fast the screen refreshes and things like that. Because even watching on my nicer TV, watching a football game can sometimes be blurry or out of focus. I don't really care that much because I process the audio as much as I process the video, but there is a pretty big difference. And then there does get to a price point, maybe maybe around the $500-$600 range, where if you're spending $1,000, you're doing it for like name brand and aesthetics and probably not for meaningful reasons.
Yeah, it's interesting, and these things are getting more high tech, and they're getting lighter, which is good. And our TV is, like I said, about 10 years old, and it's heavy. Dan, we're going to have to leave it there. We could talk about this stuff for hours. Really good information this week, and wishing you a great rest of your weekend. And we'll talk to you again next week, my friend.
I'll see you soon, Jeff.
See ya. Bye-bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to close things out, I should say, with a look at healthcare. Joining us on the line, she is the healthcare editor for Business Insider. She's also the editor of Dispense. It's a newsletter consolidating all the healthcare news going on each and every week. I'm talking about Lydia Ramsey-Flanzer. Lydia, great to talk to you as always. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And as we were talking about off mic. Busy week packed into 4 very short days. It's amazing how holidays are not really holidays anymore. But glad we could talk to you, and obviously some big news. We're talking about this on Friday afternoon here. It's Friday morning in Denver where you are. But big news, I guess last night, Thursday. And I want to get your thoughts about kind of what was said and kind of next steps.
Yeah, for sure. So, right, busy news and busy week in healthcare news from a bunch of different perspectives. Least of all, being last night, President Biden came out with this address, and he kind of laid out some new rules about vaccines. I heard someone say, like, okay, the data is pulling over the car. Like, things are going in a direction that isn't super great. So something needs to happen. And so instead of, the first part of the vaccine rollout has been a lot of incentives, like vaccine lotteries. You could win $1 million for just getting a shot. Lots of like Krispy Kreme donuts available to folks who've gotten their shots, things like that. But now we're trying the harder way, which is mandating things like vaccines for anybody involved in kind of government work, especially for healthcare workers, any health facility that gets government funding, which is quite a lot, if you can imagine, between Medicare and Medicaid. Everyone working in those facilities is mandated to get a vaccine. I think it covers about 100 million Americans who are now kind of required to get the shots. And you can imagine there's a lot of feelings about that.
Yeah, and obviously we try to just report the facts here on the network, and obviously you do a great job in that regard and whatnot. What are the next steps here? Because my understanding, and this is where your expertise comes in, is that there's going to be, I guess, let's talk about federal workers first, because I think there's some period of time that you have to either conform, or whatever the right wording is, and if not, then you go through some type of process. So there's no exemption anymore for federal workers, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Most of the time when there's mandates, either if they're private employers or federal employers, like the U.S. government, there's usually a pretty, like a 2 or 3 month window. I think a lot of windows I've seen have been around like November is when you need to get it. Some are end of the year at this point, since it's creeping up on us, regrettably. And so, yeah, so there's still a little bit of time to figure this out, really look at the data for yourself if that's of interest, or just get organized. Luckily, shops are quite widely available at this point, which is good news. But there's some time to deliberate and figure out what's happening.
Now, what about with private employers? Obviously, there's I don't know, different set of rules, but it's a little bit different, a little bit, I don't know, murkier is the right word, but there's a lot more around that, because private sector businesses, I think above 100 employees, I was going to say 100 lives, but that's the benefit guy in me. 100 employees, they have to either be checking weekly with COVID tests, or you have to get vaccinated, right? And so, is there a time frame with that as well? Or do we have to wait for rules from the Department of Labor? I'm so confused, which is not hard to do, by the way.
There is a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things that people are looking at is like what OSHA, which is the group that's been tasked with making sure this vaccine or testing requirement does, like what kind of strategy they're taking. I believe it's still a little bit up in the air, but that's kind of who will be it. But it's one of those things where like people can start implementing as soon as they want. We've seen a lot of big private employers come out with vaccine mandates. I know from my own employer, I think we have a mandate that is if you want to work from the office, you must be vaccinated, things like that. So that can really start whenever, just from if people are hesitant to make those choices, because they are really difficult choices to make. That's where this new requirement will be coming into play.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. One other thing, I think, obviously we're talking about this less than 24 hours after the announcement. So I guess we will have to see over the course of next week and the following weeks how things kind of play out. Another interesting piece that kind of dovetails into this, and I think it was something, I'm not sure exactly who wrote it for Dispense, but about the U.S. Surgeon General, about how to think about the end of the pandemic. And I've heard it referred to, you got the pandemic and then you've got the endemic, and maybe we don't get rid of this thing completely, but it's here almost like we deal with the flu and other viruses and other maladies.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. Throughout kind of 2020 and now 2021, there's been a lot of conversations about what does getting out of the pandemic look like? When does that start to happen? Things like that. Most kind of experts think we're still a few years out from that. If you just think globally, vaccines haven't been rolled out in tons of other countries to the same degree that they have in the U.S. and in Europe. So this is something we're going to be dealing with a while. But yeah, I thought what Dr. Vivek Murthy said was really interesting, which is that, like the way to think about success isn't going to be 0 cases. It's going to be just like making sure that the cases that we do have aren't, overflowing hospitals like we're seeing right now, or leading to a bunch of deaths. That's kind of always been the goal, right? Like at no point have the reason we're not as, and hopefully this starts to shift, but the reason we haven't been as like concerned about the flu is that there's been a flu vaccine that's kept a lot of people out of hospitals. Obviously hospitalizations start to spike in the winter in typical years from influenza, but the whole goal has been to make this not a super huge, really deadly or really debilitating condition. And so that's kind of how he's been thinking about it, and how, I don't know, at least I've been internalizing as like, okay, maybe there'll be no cases near me, but maybe that's not true for the whole country.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's, almost if you look at before COVID, the causes of death or the cases, right? They had all different maladies that you had, whether it was, heart disease or maybe this becomes another line. I think they did have the flu, the common flu or something like that. Let's shift gears a little bit. I know another topic of du jour, topic of interest, was Amazon's continued expansion, virtual healthcare. I know we were talking a little bit about that offline. They amaze me, Amazon, because I was just earlier in the show we were talking about them creating their own televisions, and they just keep rolling along. And here they are expanding. Looks like they're going to expand their virtual health services nationally to over 20 different cities.
Yeah, and it won't just be virtual. The plan, we got the scoop on this, is to have home-based visits as well. So less like in-person clinics, but places like a doctor might show up at your doorstep when you aren't feeling great, things like that. But they have plans to be doing that in 20 additional cities. They're in a couple so far, mostly in like Seattle and I think believe it's out in Maryland or a few other places. But the hope is to do that by 2022, to be in 20 more cities, 4 of which will be by the end of 2021. But it's interesting to see that their ambitions are quite big, and especially when you kind of backdrop it with how other big tech companies are viewing healthcare. We're seeing Google in particular a couple weeks ago had said or lost its top leader, David Feinberg. He went to work for the health IT company Cerner. So it's interesting to see Amazon really pushing ahead at a time when others are kind of like, okay, maybe we need to pump the brakes. Healthcare is quite hard. So I'll be curious to see how Amazon does with this.
Yeah, I just don't get the feeling that pump the brakes is part of their vocabulary. Do you? I mean, I can't see them. When have they ever gone backwards? Or, I can't think of anything. And just pointing to this, and I did not realize, Lydia, that you could actually have someone come to your home, and that kind of takes it back to when I was a kid. When I was still a kid, you would have doctors come visit your home. That obviously is a very expensive model, but clearly they figured out a way to have a health professional. Maybe it's not a doctor per se or a general practitioner, but finding somebody to come to your home and diagnose you instead of having to go in and possibly infect other people or get other people sick. That seems like, hey, look, I'd love to have the doctor come to my house or apartment.
Yeah, totally. It's something that's gonna be. It's a really not an easy endeavor. I think there's quite a few reasons why home care visits aren't common these days. It's kind of expensive, right? You have to hire people to drive around. We've seen a couple. I was remembering there were a couple of startups that were pitching this as a concept for consumers back in New York back in like the mid 2010s. So it's definitely been around for a little bit. So I'll be curious to see if Amazon can pull it off, because I'll give you a counterexample, which is Haven, the joint venture with Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan, with the caveat that was a joint venture. Amazon obviously didn't. that ended up kind of falling apart toward the end.
Yeah. And then what about our friends at Walmart? I mean, they're another huge company looking at this. I mean, it really is amazing. I mean, yes, Walmart is not a tech company in the purest sense. I mean, they're really a retailer, right? And the big box store. But the fact that these companies are coming in and looking, how can we do it better and leverage our practices, I think says a lot about how we could find better ways to deliver healthcare and lower the overall cost, which seems to be a huge burden, not only on people today, but will be a burden on people going forward.
Definitely. I think we might have talked about this last time, but I'm as curious as I am about Walmart. I'm curious about Dollar General and some of the moves it's been making in recent weeks.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Healthcare.
What an exciting space to cover. Lydia, we're going to have to leave it there. Again, we're not doing the topic enough justice, but people can certainly check out Dispense and all the great writing by Lydia and her team there. Lydia, take care. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. That wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow for BRN AM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.